Hey everybody, welcome back to Whiskey Central. If you're new here, my name is Shayla, and today I'm reviewing Maker's Mark whiskey. So I've got some history for you today, but if you want to skip around to other parts of the video, there's timestamps in the description box below. And if you enjoy whiskey reviews, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new videos. Bill Samuels Sr. created Maker's Mark. In the fall of 1953, he bought land outside of Loretto, Kentucky, which he renamed to Star Hill Farms. On the land, there was a small, run-down Burke Spring distillery that had been closed since Prohibition. He cooked up the recipe for his bourbon in the kitchen with his wife, Margie. They decided on a mash bill flavored with red winter wheat instead of the more typical rye, after baking 7 different loaves of bread. In 1954, they distilled their first 19-barrel batch of Maker's Mark whiskey. Margie was also responsible for the name of the distillery. She had a pewter collection and liked the idea of a pewter mark or a Maker's Mark. And every bottle has one of these marks on it. It has a star for Star Hill Farms, the S for Samuel, and the Roman numeral 4 because Samuel was the 4th generation distiller. He actually was the 6th generation distiller, but they didn't find that out until later. Although many other whiskeys have wax seals, the dripping wax on every Maker's Mark bottle is a U.S. protected trademark. The first bottle of Maker's Mark was bottled and hand-dipped on the 8th of May in 1958, and they are still hand-dipped in 400-degree red wax to this day. If you get a chance to visit the distillery, you can also hand-dip your own bottle. The distillery keeps a lot of its production old school. They have a 1935 Chandler and Price printing press that they use to make their labels with. They also use an antique roller mill to crush their grain, instead of the more modern hammer mill. They also hand rotate their barrels, which is something that almost nobody bothers with nowadays. They stay in their first location for 3 years, then the barrels on the 7th floor move to the 1st, the 6th move to the 2nd, the 5th move to the 3rd, and the 4th stay in the same place. After the barrels are used once, they are sent to the Laphroaig distillery on Islay in Scotland. In 2013, with growing popularity, Maker's Mark announced that it needed to reduce its bottling strength from 45 to 42% ABV. Loyalists went a bit crazy and the company quickly backpedaled their statement. In 2014, Beam Suntory announced a $67 million expansion plan for Maker's, which included new warehouses and a 3rd identical still to boost capacity. Alright, so let's get into the details of this whiskey. This bottle will run you about $22. It's owned by Beam Suntory, and it's made in Loretto, Kentucky. It's aged for about 6 years, it's 45% ABV, and the mash bill is 70% corn, 16% red winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. It's aged in new level 3 charred oak barrels, it is non-colored, and it's chill filtered. Alright, well, I'm going to pour a dram of this, let it sit for about 10 minutes, and I'll be right back. Alright, I've let this open up for about 10 minutes. Let's go in for a nose. So the first thing I notice is that it's more delicate than a lot of other bourbons that I've had. That wheat, as opposed to rye, brings a softness to the nose. Then you get that traditional caramel, vanilla custard, a little bit of honey, maybe even a little bit of maple syrup. It's really sweet. So I get cherry on the nose, and for each review that I do, I pour a dram, put a cap on it, and then let it sit overnight to oxidize. And when I did that with this, it got really like a medicinal cherry note. Then there's some oak on there, a nice little orange kind of zest in the back, some baking spices, cinnamon, clove. And I think that's from the wheat. I don't know if this is just in my head, but there's a little bit of like a little bit of pastry, like a pastry bready kind ofness. Let's go on the palate. Cheers, guys. So it's sweet, and it's actually more bold on the palate than it was on the nose. Get a little bit of a drying oak, mid to back palate, a little bit of baking spice, and then that caramel and vanilla kind of come in. let's go for another sip. Cheers. So for the finish, I would say short to medium finish. It's not super complex on the nose or the palate, but it's a really enjoyable dram. So I'm gonna finish it up and I'll be right back with my recommendation. I think this is a great starter bourbon. I'm actually enjoying it more as I get down the bottle. And this is not my favorite bourbon at this price point, but I think for beginners, it's got that soft wheat instead of that spicy rye that I think they'll enjoy. Also, I think this would be a great bourbon to make cocktails with. If you like this bottle, you can go for a step up and get the Maker's Cask Strength or the Maker's 46. If you can find it in your area, Weller would also be a great option. And you could get Larceny, which is a wheater as well, but it's got a different taste profile than Weller or the other Maker's options. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Whiskey Central. Next week, I'll be doing a review of the Glenmorangie tasting set, so if you don't want to miss out, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, leave it a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Better, Shayla. Better. Okay. His wife, Margie, using an oven instead of a still. Am I recording? 100-degree red wax to this day. Fucking shit. Fucking Christ. That took a while. Okay. This one's gonna take a while too.